"You want sons, right? Take my daughter to bear them," said the widowed mountain woman I saved. The winter of 1887 struck the Colorado Territory with unprecedented fury. Samuel Morrison pulled his coat tighter against the howling wind as his horse struggled through knee-deep snow along the treacherous mountain path. At 45, he'd made this journey from Denver to Pine Creek countless times, but never in conditions this brutal. The lumber sale had taken longer than expected, and now darkness was falling fast. Each gust seemed determined to tear him from his saddle. Samuel squinted through the swirling snow, searching for landmarks that might guide him home to his 3 boys waiting anxiously by the fire. That's when he heard it, a desperate scream cutting through the storm. Samuel reined in his horse, straining to listen above the wind's fury. There it was again, high-pitched and filled with terror. Without hesitation, he spurred his mount toward the sound, following a barely visible trail that wound deeper into the wilderness. The orange glow appeared first, flickering through the trees like hellfire. As Samuel crested a small ridge, his blood ran cold. Below him, a modest log cabin was engulfed in flames, and 2 figures stood helplessly in the snow watching their world burn. "Help us!" The voice belonged to a woman, her accent thick with Spanish inflection. "Please, senor, help us." Samuel dismounted and ran toward them, his boots sinking deep with each step. The woman appeared to be in her early 40s, her dark hair streaked with gray, and her face etched with lines of hardship. Beside her stood a younger woman, barely more than a girl, with striking features and eyes that held both fear and fierce determination. "Are you hurt?" Samuel shouted over the roar of flames and wind. "No, but everything is gone," the older woman replied, her voice breaking. "The chimney caught the roof. We barely escaped with our lives." Samuel looked at the inferno that had once been their home. Nothing could be saved. The wind was spreading burning embers in all directions, and standing here much longer would be dangerous. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. "The fire could spread, and this storm is getting worse. You'll freeze to death before morning." The young woman spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "We have nowhere to go, senor. This was our home." Samuel studied their faces. Mother and daughter, he guessed. They were strangers to him, but leaving them here would be murder by neglect. His own sons were waiting, worried about their father's late return, but these 2 would be dead by dawn if he rode away. "My name is Samuel Morrison. I live in Pine Creek, about an hour's ride south. You'll come with me." The older woman's eyes filled with tears. "Senor Morrison, we cannot impose—" "It's not an imposition," Samuel interrupted, already moving toward his horse. "It's what any decent person would do. Can you both ride?" The mother nodded. "I am Elena Valdez, and this is my daughter, Isabella. We are most grateful, senor." Samuel helped them onto his horse, Elena behind him and Isabella clinging to her mother. The journey down the mountain was treacherous, made worse by the weight of 3 riders and the horses' exhaustion. More than once, Samuel thought they might not make it, but finally, the warm lights of Pine Creek appeared through the storm. His house sat on the edge of town, a substantial 2-story structure that spoke of modest prosperity. As they approached, 3 young faces appeared in the front window. Samuel's boys, ages 6, 9, and 12, watching anxiously for their father's return. The front door opened before they reached the porch, and Samuel's mother-in-law, Martha Collins, stepped out with a stern expression that only deepened when she saw the strangers. "Samuel Morrison, where have you been? These boys have been worried sick, and I—" She stopped mid-sentence, taking in the 2 women covered in soot and snow. "Who are these people?" "Martha, help me get them inside. Their cabin burned down in the storm. They need shelter and warmth." Martha's lips pressed into a thin line, but she stepped aside. Samuel's boys, David, Michael, and little Thomas, gathered around their father with obvious relief, but their curious eyes kept darting to the 2 strangers. "Boys, this is Mrs. Valdez and her daughter Isabella. They're going to stay with us until the storm passes and we can figure out what's next." Samuel knelt to embrace his sons, grateful to see them safe. Elena Valdez looked around the comfortable parlor with its stone fireplace, handmade furniture, and family photographs. Everything spoke of love and loss, a woman's touch evident in the details, but a woman clearly no longer present. "Your wife," Elena said softly, noticing Samuel's glance at a framed photograph on the mantel. She was beautiful. Sarah died 3 years ago. Fever took her in just 2 days. Samuel's voice carried the weight of grief that time had softened, but never erased. Martha, Mrs. Collins is Sarah's mother. She helps me with the boys. Martha bustled about, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but too well-bred to be openly inhospitable. I'll prepare the spare room, she announced. Though I must say, Samuel, bringing strangers into a house with young children, they needed help, Martha. What would you have had me do? Isabella stepped forward, her voice gentle but confident. Perhaps I could help with dinner, Senora? And washing dishes? We do not wish to be burdens. Despite herself, Martha seemed impressed by the girl's manners. Well, I suppose. Yes, that would be helpful. As the evening progressed, Samuel found himself watching the 2 women who had so suddenly entered his orderly life. Elena moved with quiet dignity despite her circumstances, and her love for her daughter was evident in every protective glance. Isabella, meanwhile, seemed to naturally connect with his boys, helping them with their evening chores and listening to their chatter with genuine interest. After the children were in bed, Samuel sat with Elena by the dying fire, while Martha retired to her room with obvious disapproval, still radiating from her stiff posture. Tell me about yourselves, Samuel said. Have you lived on the mountain long? Elena's hands twisted in her lap. 2 years since my husband died. Ramon worked in the silver mines near Leadville. There was an accident, a cave-in. Her voice grew distant. After his death, my own family, they had never approved of my marriage to a Mexican man. They would not take us in. I'm sorry for your loss, Samuel said sincerely. It can't have been easy raising a daughter alone in such isolation. Isabella is strong, like her father. She helped me build our life up there, such as it was. We grew what we could, hunted when necessary, and I took in sewing from the mining camps. It was not much, but it was ours. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Now we have nothing. Samuel studied this woman who had endured so much with such grace. There was something about her quiet strength that reminded him of Sarah, though they looked nothing alike. Elena was darker, more weathered by hardship, but she possessed the same inner resilience that he had loved in his wife. You're not alone now, he heard himself say. We'll figure something out. Elena looked at him with surprise and something that might have been hope. You are very kind, Signor Morrison, but we cannot stay here long. People will talk, and your reputation. Let them talk, Samuel said, though he knew she was right. Pine Creek was a small town where gossip spread faster than wildfire, and a widowed man harboring 2 Hispanic women would certainly provide fodder for the rumor mill. The next morning brought no relief from the storm. If anything, it had intensified. Samuel sent word to the general store that he wouldn't be opening for business and settled in to wait out nature's fury. His boys, initially shy around the strangers, were soon charmed by Isabella's gentle manner and Elena's stories of mountain life. Martha, however, grew increasingly agitated as the day wore on. She cornered Samuel in his study, while Elena and Isabella were helping the boys with their lessons. Samuel, this has gone far enough, she said, closing the door firmly behind her. I understand Christian charity, but you cannot seriously be thinking of keeping these people here indefinitely. They have nowhere else to go, Martha. That's not your responsibility. You have 3 young boys to think about, a business to run, a reputation in this community. What will people say when they learn you've been harboring strange women in your home? Samuel's jaw tightened. I don't particularly care what people say. Well, you should. These boys will have to live in this town long after you're gone. Do you want them remembered as the children of the man who caused a scandal? Before Samuel could respond, a soft knock interrupted them. Isabella's voice came through the door. Senor Morrison, I am sorry to disturb you, but little Thomas is asking for his papa. Samuel opened the door to find Isabella standing there with his youngest son clinging to her skirts. The sight struck him unexpectedly. This beautiful young woman with his boy looking up at her with complete trust. Papa! Thomas reached for his father. Isabella was teaching us Spanish words. Did you know familia means family? Is that so? Samuel lifted his son, but his eyes remained on Isabella. There was something unsettling about the way she looked at him. Not with romantic interest, but with a kind of hopeful evaluation that made him uncomfortable. That night, as the storm finally began to show signs of abating, Samuel found himself unable to sleep. He wandered down to the kitchen for a glass of water and discovered Elena sitting at the table, staring into the darkness. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked softly. She turned, and he was struck by how beautiful she looked in the lamplight, despite the lines of worry around her eyes. "I have been thinking about tomorrow, about what comes next for Isabella and me." Samuel sat across from her, suddenly aware of how intimate this moment felt. The storm should break by morning, but Elena, you don't have to leave immediately. Take time to figure out your next move. You are very kind, but we both know this cannot continue. Already your mother-in-law looks at us with suspicion, and the people in town. I told you I don't care about gossip, but you should, Elena said. You have sons to raise, a place in this community. We are strangers, foreigners. Our presence here can only bring you trouble. Samuel studied her face, noting the proud tilt of her chin, even in defeat. Where will you go? I do not know. Perhaps Denver. Isabella could find work there, maybe as a seamstress or in a hotel. I am not so young anymore, but I am still strong enough for domestic work. The thought of this woman and her daughter facing the harsh world alone stirred something protective in Samuel. Elena, you don't have to. Yes, I do, she interrupted. But before we go, I must speak honestly with you about something. Samuel waited, sensing the weight of whatever she was about to say. Elena took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. I have watched you these past 2 days, Signor Morrison. You are a good man, a loving father, but you are also lonely, and your boys, they need a mother's touch. Elena, she held up a hand to stop him. Please let me finish. I have seen how David tries to be the man of the house, how Michael acts out because he misses his mama, how little Thomas clings to any woman who shows him kindness. They are good boys, but they are hurting. Samuel's throat tightened. I do my best. I know you do. But a man cannot be both father and mother, no matter how hard he tries. Elena leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. You need a wife, Samuel. Someone to help you raise these boys, to give you the family life you deserve. Elena, if you're suggesting, I am too old, she said bluntly. 42 years, and the mountain has aged me beyond my years. I could be a good wife to you, I think, but I could not give you more children. She paused, her next words seeming to cost her great effort. But Isabella, she is young, beautiful, strong. She would make you a fine wife. Samuel felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. Elena, what are you saying? Her voice dropped to a whisper, but her words hit him like a physical blow. You want sons, right? Take my daughter to bear them. The silence that followed was deafening. Samuel stared at this woman who had just offered her daughter like some kind of business transaction. Elena continued, her voice gaining strength as if she had rehearsed these words. It would not be a marriage of convenience only. Isabella has already grown fond of your boys, and I see how she looks at you. With respect, admiration, love could grow between you. She is 19, old enough to know her own mind, but young enough to give you many children. And I, her voice broke slightly, I would have a family again, a place to belong. Samuel pushed back from the table, his mind reeling. Elena, I can't. This is impossible. Isabella is just a child. She is a woman grown, Elena said firmly. In my culture, many girls marry at her age. And you are not an old man, Samuel. 45 is the prime of life for a man of substance. But to marry someone I barely know, someone young enough to be your daughter? Elena's smile was sad. Perhaps that is how you see her now, but you have not truly looked at her as a woman. She is beautiful, hard-working, intelligent. Many men would consider themselves fortunate to win her hand. Samuel's mind raced. The proposal was shocking, almost primitive in its directness, yet he couldn't deny the practical wisdom in Elena's words. His boys did need a mother figure, and he had been lonely for so long that he'd almost forgotten what companionship felt like. I need time to think, he said finally. Elena nodded. Of course, but Samuel, please consider what I have said, for all our sakes. Samuel Morrison spent a sleepless night wrestling with Elena's shocking proposal. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Isabella's face, young, trusting, beautiful. The very fact that he could acknowledge her beauty made him feel like a lecher preying on innocence. Yet Elena's words haunted him. His boys did need a mother. David, at 12, was already trying to fill the role of man of the house, a burden too heavy for such young shoulders. 9-year-old Michael had grown increasingly rebellious since Sarah's death, acting out in ways that Samuel struggled to address alone. And little Thomas, barely 6, still sometimes cried for his mama in the dark hours before dawn. When morning came, bringing with it bright sunshine and the first break in the weather in 3 days, Samuel felt no closer to an answer. He avoided Elena's eyes at breakfast, focusing instead on his boy's excitement about being able to play outside again. "Papa, can Isabella come sledding with us?" Thomas asked, tugging on Samuel's sleeve. "She promised to teach me to make snow angels." Before Samuel could answer, Isabella herself appeared in the kitchen doorway, her dark hair braided back and her cheeks glowing with health and youth. She wore one of Sarah's old dresses that Martha had reluctantly provided, a simple blue wool that somehow looked entirely different on her than it ever had on his fair-haired wife. "If your papa says it is all right," Isabella said, her English accented but clear. "I would love to play in the snow with you." Samuel felt a strange flutter in his chest as she smiled at him. Was this what Elena meant about not truly seeing her daughter as a woman? Because at this moment, with the morning light catching the gold flecks in her brown eyes, it was impossible to think of Isabella as anything but a beautiful young woman. "Of course," he heard himself say. "Just stay close to the house." As the children bundled up and headed outside, Martha appeared beside him, her expression grim. "That girl is quite pretty, isn't she?" Samuel started, wondering if his thoughts were so transparent. "I hadn't particularly noticed." Martha's snort made it clear what she thought of that statement. "Samuel Morrison, I may be getting old, but I'm not blind. That Mexican woman has set her cap for you, and she's using her daughter as bait." "Martha, that's an uncharitable thing to say." "Is it? Mark my words, Samuel. She'll have some proposition for you before they leave this house. Women like that, they know how to use their looks to get what they want." The irony of Martha's words coming so soon after Elena's midnight proposal made Samuel wince. His mother-in-law might be prejudiced and harsh, but her instincts weren't wrong. Throughout the morning, Samuel found himself watching Isabella with new eyes. She moved with unconscious grace, whether helping in the kitchen or playing with the boys outside. When she laughed at one of Michael's jokes, her whole face lit up. When Thomas fell and scraped his knee, she comforted him with the natural instincts of a born mother. Elena, meanwhile, seemed to be watching Samuel watch her daughter. Several times he caught her observing him with an expression that might have been calculation or might have been hope. As afternoon wore on, word spread through Pine Creek that the storm had passed, and Samuel knew he would have to open his store the next morning. Normal life would resume, which meant decisions had to be made about his unexpected house guests. The question was answered for him when Thomas Bradley arrived at his door just as they were finishing dinner. Thomas was a successful rancher from the next valley over, a widower himself who had been courting several eligible women in the surrounding area with the methodical patience of a man selecting livestock. "Samuel," Thomas called out heartily as he was welcomed into the parlor. "I heard through the grapevine that you'd taken in some refugees from the fire up on Eagle Peak. Thought I'd ride over and see if there was anything I could do to help." Samuel introduced Thomas to Elena and Isabella, noting how the rancher's eyes lingered appreciatively on the younger woman. Thomas was only 35, closer to Isabella's age than Samuel was, and his ranch made him one of the most eligible bachelors in the territory. "Miss Valdez," Thomas said, taking Isabella's hand and holding it perhaps a moment longer than propriety dictated. "I'm sorry for your loss, but I must say you've landed in good hands. Samuel Morrison is one of the finest men in Colorado Territory." Isabella smiled politely, but Samuel noticed she withdrew her hand quickly. "Senor Morrison has been very kind to my mother and me." "I imagine he has," Thomas replied, his meaning unmistakable. "Tell me, what are your plans now? I assume you'll be looking for somewhere to settle permanently." Elena answered for her daughter. "We hope to find work in Denver, senor. My Isabella is skilled with a needle, and I'm strong enough for domestic work." Thomas frowned. "Denver's a rough city for 2 women alone. Wouldn't you be better off staying closer to familiar territory? His eyes found Isabella again. I happen to be in need of a housekeeper at my ranch. The position comes with a small cabin of its own, and I'd pay fair wages. The offer hung in the air like smoke from a poorly drawing chimney. Samuel felt something twist in his stomach, jealousy, though he tried to tell himself it was merely concern for Isabella's welfare. That is very generous, Elena said carefully. We would need to discuss it. Of course, no pressure. But I should mention that I'm also in the market for a wife. Thomas's directness made everyone in the room stiffen slightly. A man gets lonely running a spread by himself, and I'd want children to carry on what I've built. Miss Valdez, if you don't mind me being blunt, you're exactly the kind of woman I've been hoping to find. Isabella's cheeks flushed red. Senor Bradley, Now, I know we've only just met, Thomas continued, seemingly oblivious to her discomfort. But I believe in speaking plain. You're beautiful, well-mannered, and clearly bred for hard work. I could offer you security, respectability, and a comfortable life. What do you say? The silence that followed was excruciating. Samuel watched Isabella's face, seeing confusion and something that might have been panic in her expression. Elena looked torn between opportunity and something else. Disappointment, perhaps? Senor Bradley, Isabella said finally, her voice steady despite her obvious discomfort. You honor me with your proposal, but we have only just met. Surely you cannot expect an answer to such an important question so quickly. Thomas laughed heartily. Fair enough. I like a woman with sense. Take your time to think it over. But don't take too long. A girl like you won't stay unattached for long in these parts. After Thomas left, the house seemed to vibrate with tension. Martha, who had observed the entire exchange with barely concealed satisfaction, was the first to speak. Well, Isabella, that was quite an opportunity. Thomas Bradley is a catch by any standard. He seems like a decent man, Elena agreed, though her tone lacked enthusiasm. Samuel found himself saying, he's also presumptuous and arrogant. Marriage isn't a business transaction. All eyes turned to him, and he realized his vehemence had revealed more than he intended. Martha raised an eyebrow meaningfully. Sometimes the most practical marriages turn out to be the happiest, she said pointedly. At least Mr. Bradley is being honest about what he wants. That night, Samuel sat in his study trying to concentrate on his account books, but the numbers blurred before his eyes. Elena's proposition and Thomas Bradley's crude marriage offer swirled in his mind like competing melodies in a discordant symphony. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. To his surprise, it was Isabella who entered, not Elena. She closed the door behind her and stood there for a moment, clearly gathering her courage. Senor Morrison, I must speak with you about something important. Samuel gestured to the chair across from his desk, acutely aware of how the lamplight played across her features. Of course. What's troubling you? I overheard my mother talking to you last night. Samuel's blood turned to ice. Isabella, please let me speak. She held up a hand, her dark eyes blazing with emotion. I heard what she proposed to you. I heard her offer me like a broodmare to be traded. The pain in her voice cut Samuel to the quick. Isabella, your mother loves you. She was only thinking of your welfare. Was she? Isabella's laugh was bitter beyond her years. Or was she thinking of her own security? Because I know my mother, Senor Morrison. I know how her mind works. She sees you as salvation for both of us, and she is willing to sacrifice my happiness to achieve it. Samuel didn't know what to say. Elena's love for her daughter was obvious, but Isabella's assessment wasn't entirely wrong either. I want you to know, Isabella continued, her voice growing stronger, that I had no part in her scheme. I did not ask her to make such a proposal, and I do not wish to be bartered away like a piece of livestock. I never thought you did, Samuel said quietly, and I want you to know that I would never take advantage of your circumstances or your youth. Something flickered in Isabella's eyes. Was it disappointment? So you are not? That is, you have no interest in my mother's proposal? The question caught Samuel off guard. There was something in the way she asked it, a vulnerability beneath the defiance, that made him look at her more closely. Isabella, you're a beautiful young woman with your whole life ahead of you. You shouldn't waste it on a widower with 3 children and more responsibilities than prospects. But you have not answered my question, she pressed. If circumstances were different, if I were older, if we had met in another way, would you consider me as a wife? Samuel stared at her, seeing past the youth to the woman she was becoming. Elena was right about one thing. Isabella was no longer a child. There was wisdom in her dark eyes, strength in the set of her shoulders, and something else. Something that called to the lonely man in him. I think, he said carefully, that any man would be fortunate to win your affections. But I also think you deserve better than a marriage born of desperation and convenience. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. And what of Signor Bradley's proposal? What of it? He could offer me security, position, children of my own someday. Is that not what every woman wants? Samuel felt that familiar twist of jealousy. Is that what you want? I do not know, Isabella admitted. I do not know what I want because I have never been free to want anything. Since Papa died, every decision has been about survival, about what my mother and I needed to do to stay alive. But now, for the first time, men are offering me choices. And what does your heart tell you about those choices? Isabella looked at him for a long moment, and Samuel felt as if she were seeing into his soul. My heart tells me that love cannot be forced or negotiated. It tells me that marriage should be about more than security or convenience or even children. It should be about partnership, about 2 people choosing to face the world together. Her words hit him like a revelation. You're very wise for 19. Hardship ages a person quickly, she replied. I have seen enough of life to know the difference between a man who wants a wife and a man who wants a woman to serve his needs. Before Samuel could respond, the door burst open and Thomas bounded in, clearly having had a few drinks to warm himself on the cold ride home. Samuel and Miss Valdez. Perfect, I was hoping to have another word. Isabella stood quickly, smoothing her skirts. I should go. Nonsense, Thomas said, swaying slightly. This concerns you too. I've been thinking about our conversation earlier, and I've decided I don't want to wait for your answer. I'm prepared to make this worth your while. Samuel rose from his chair, alarm bells ringing in his head. Thomas, perhaps you should come back when you're more sober. I'm perfectly fine, Thomas slurred. Miss Valdez, I'll double my original offer. $500 for a wedding dowry, plus a house in town and a monthly allowance for your mother. You'll never want for anything. Isabella backed toward the door, her face pale. Signor Bradley, please. I know what you're thinking, Thomas continued, advancing on her with the persistence of a man who had never been refused anything he truly wanted. Why should you trust a stranger? Well, let me prove my intentions are honorable. Before anyone could react, Thomas grabbed Isabella's arms and pulled her against him, pressing his whiskey-soaked lips to hers in a brutal kiss that spoke more of possession than affection. Isabella cried out and tried to push him away, but Thomas's grip was strong. That's when Samuel moved. The punch connected with Thomas's jaw with a satisfying crack that sent the rancher sprawling across the study floor. Samuel stood over him, his fists still clenched while Isabella shrank back against the wall. Get out of my house, Samuel said, his voice deadly quiet. Thomas struggled to his feet, holding his jaw and looking stunned. Samuel, what the hell? Get out. Now. Before I do something we'll both regret. Something in Samuel's tone must have penetrated Thomas's alcohol-fueled confidence, because he backed toward the door. You'll regret this, Morrison. That little Mexican girl isn't worth making an enemy over. The moment Thomas left, Elena burst into the room, having heard the commotion. She took in the scene, her daughter's tears, Samuel's bloody knuckles, and the overturned chair, and immediately went to Isabella. ¿Qué pasó, mija? She asked, reverting to Spanish in her distress. Signor Bradley, he forced himself on me, Isabella whispered. If not for Signor Morrison. Elena's face went white with rage. That animal. I will kill him myself. He's gone, Samuel said, flexing his bruised hand. And he won't be welcome here again. Elena looked between Samuel and her daughter, and something shifted in her expression. Samuel, you defended my daughter's honor. You could have made an enemy of a powerful man, but you chose to protect her instead. Any decent man would have done the same. No, Elena said softly. Not any man. Only a man who truly cares about what happens to her. The weight of Elena's words settled over the room like dust after a stampede. Isabella looked at Samuel with something new in her eyes. Not gratitude, but recognition. She had seen him choose her welfare over his own interests, and something had changed between them in that moment. "I should retire," Isabella said quietly. "Thank you, Senor Morrison, for everything." After she left, Elena remained, studying Samuel with the intensity of a woman reassessing everything she thought she knew. "You care for her," she said. It wasn't a question. Samuel didn't try to deny it. "She's a remarkable young woman. But she deserves better than a marriage born of desperation. She deserves to be courted properly, to have choices, to find love on her own terms." Elena smiled sadly. "You truly are a good man, Samuel Morrison. Perhaps too good for this world." "Elena, I withdraw my proposal," she said firmly. "Not because I think it was wrong, but because I can see now that it was unnecessary. What will grow between you and my daughter will be real, or it will be nothing at all. And that is as it should be." The second storm struck Pine Creek 3 days later, but this tempest was not born of nature. It began when Thomas Bradley rode into town with a black eye, and a story about Samuel Morrison harboring immoral foreign women in his home. Samuel first learned of the brewing scandal when his friend and fellow merchant, James Patterson, pulled him aside at the general store. "Sam, you need to know what's being said around town," James whispered, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "Bradley's been telling anyone who'll listen that you're living in sin with those Mexican women. Says he caught you in a compromising position with the young one." Samuel's blood boiled. "That's a damned lie, and you know it." "I know it, but not everyone does. And Martha Collins isn't helping matters any. She's been telling the church ladies that you've lost your head over a pretty face and forgotten your Christian duties." The betrayal by his own mother-in-law hit Samuel like a physical blow. "Martha said that? I'm sorry, Sam. I thought you should know what you're up against." By the time Samuel returned home that evening, the damage was already evident. His boys met him at the door with troubled faces. "Papa," David said, his 12-year-old voice heavy with confusion. "Some boys at school were saying things about Isabella and Mrs. Valdez. Bad things. I got in a fight with Billy Henderson about it." Samuel knelt to examine his son's split lip. "What kind of things?" "I can't repeat them," David said, his face flushing. "But they weren't true, were they, Papa? The things they said about our family." The word family struck Samuel powerfully. Without realizing it, his boys had already begun to think of Elena and Isabella as part of their household, part of their lives. "No, son, they weren't true. But sometimes people say cruel things when they're afraid of what they don't understand." That night, after the children were in bed, Samuel found Elena and Isabella in the kitchen. They were packing their few belongings with quiet efficiency. "What are you doing?" he asked, though he already knew. "What we should have done days ago," Elena replied without looking up. "We have brought scandal to your house, Samuel. Your boys should not have to pay the price for our presence." "Where will you go?" "Denver," Isabella said simply. "We will take the morning stage." Samuel watched them fold their borrowed clothes. These two women who had somehow become essential to his happiness in such a short time. The house would feel empty without Elena's quiet strength and Isabella's laughter. His boys would be heartbroken. He would be heartbroken. "What if I don't want you to go?" Both women stopped packing. Elena looked at him with surprise, but Isabella's expression was unreadable. "Samuel," Elena said gently, "you cannot sacrifice your reputation and your son's futures for us. We are grateful for everything you have done. But nothing," Samuel interrupted. "Let me ask you something. Are you leaving because you want to, or because you think you have to?" Elena and Isabella exchanged glances. "Samuel," Elena said carefully, "what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I've spent 3 years being the kind of man this town expects me to be. The grieving widower who does his duty and causes no trouble. But I'm tired of living my life according to other people's expectations." Isabella moved closer, her dark eyes searching his face. "And what kind of man do you want to be? The kind who fights for what matters to him. The kind who doesn't let fear or gossip drive away the people he—" Samuel paused. the weight of what he was about to say settling over him. The people he loves. The word hung in the air between them, changing everything. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but Isabella stepped even closer, close enough that Samuel could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "Do you mean that?" Isabella whispered. Before Samuel could answer, the front door slammed open with such force that it rattled the windows. Martha Collins stood in the doorway, her face twisted with righteous fury and something that looked suspiciously like brandy-fueled courage. "I knew it," she declared, swaying slightly. "I knew this would happen. Sarah's barely cold in her grave, and here you are making a fool of yourself over some foreign hussy." "Martha, you're drunk," Samuel said, moving protectively in front of Isabella. "Go to bed. Don't you dare tell me what to do in my daughter's house," Martha shrieked. "Yes, that's right, this was Sarah's house, and you're defiling her memory with these women." Elena stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Senora Collins, we understand your concern, but don't you speak to me." Martha whirled on her. "I know what you're doing, you scheming witch. Using your daughter to trap a lonely man, turning his children against their own grandmother. That's enough." Samuel's voice cracked like a whip. "Elena and Isabella are guests in this house, and you will treat them with respect or you will leave." Martha's laugh was harsh and bitter. "Oh, I'll leave, all right. But not before I tell you what everyone in town is already saying. They're calling you a fool, Samuel Morrison. Middle-aged fool led around by his desires like a bull with a ring through its nose." "Let them talk," Samuel said quietly. "And what about your boys? What about David and Michael and little Thomas? Do you think they deserve to grow up known as the children of Pine Creek scandal? Do you think Sarah would want that for her sons?" The mention of his boys and his late wife hit Samuel like a physical blow. Martha, seeing her advantage, pressed on mercilessly. "You think you love this girl, but you don't even know her. She could be anyone, could have done anything before she came here. For all you know, she's not even the innocent you think she is." That's when Isabella finally spoke, her voice cutting through Martha's tirade like a blade through silk. "You want to know who I am, Senora? I will tell you. I am the daughter of a woman who married for love and was cast out by her family for it. I am the girl who watched her father die coughing up blood from the mines, who helped her mother bury him with her own hands because we had no money for a proper funeral. I am the woman who has worked since she was 14 to keep food on our table, who has gone hungry so my mother could eat, who has never owned a dress that wasn't made from scraps." Isabella's voice grew stronger with each word, her accent becoming more pronounced as emotion overtook careful diction. "I am not innocent, Senora, if by innocent you mean ignorant of life's hardships, but I am pure in my intentions, honest in my affections, and proud of the woman my struggles have made me. If that is not good enough for your family, then perhaps your family is not good enough for me." The silence that followed was deafening. Martha stood there, clearly taken aback by Isabella's eloquent defense of herself. Even Samuel was stunned by the passion and dignity with which this young woman had spoken. But it was Elena who broke the silence, her voice filled with a mother's fierce pride. "That is my daughter," she said simply. "That is the woman you dare to call unworthy." Martha, realizing she had lost this battle, fell back on her last weapon. "Fine. Have your foreign bride, Samuel. But don't expect me to stay and watch you destroy everything Sarah built. I'm going to my sister's in Denver and I'm taking the boys with me." "No." Samuel's voice was quiet but absolute. "You're not taking my sons anywhere. They're my grandsons. I have rights. You have the right to leave if you choose. But David, Michael, and Thomas stay here with me. They stay with their family." He looked at Elena and Isabella as he said the last word, making his meaning clear. Martha's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like the broken old woman she was, rather than the avenging fury she'd been trying to portray. "Samuel, please, don't do this. Don't choose them over Sarah's memory." "I'm not choosing anyone over Sarah's memory," Samuel said gently. "I'm choosing life over loneliness, love over fear. Sarah would understand that." Martha stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. They heard her climbing the stairs, heard her bedroom door slam, and then silence. Elena was the first to speak. "Samuel, we cannot let you lose your family over us. "You're not making me lose anything," Samuel replied. "You're helping me remember what family really means." He turned to Isabella, taking her hands in his. "I know this isn't the romantic courtship you deserve. I know the circumstances are complicated and the timing is terrible. But I also know that somewhere between rescuing you from that fire and watching you comfort my son today, I fell in love with you." Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Samuel, I'm not asking you to marry me out of gratitude or convenience," he continued. "I'm asking because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because when I think about the future, you're in every picture. You and your mother and my boys, all of us together. But the town, the scandal, will pass," Samuel said firmly. "People love to talk, but they get bored quickly when there's nothing new to say. And those who truly matter will come to see what I see. That you're an extraordinary woman who makes me a better man." Isabella looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Follow your heart, Mija. It has never led you wrong." When Isabella turned back to Samuel, her face was radiant with joy and tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you. Not because I need security or because my mother wishes it, but because I love you too." Samuel pulled her into his arms, and their kiss was everything their first should be, tender, passionate, and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Elena was smiling through her own tears. "And what of me?" she asked with gentle humor. "Do I get a say in these wedding plans?" Samuel reached out and took her hand as well. "Elena, you're not losing a daughter. I'm gaining a mother. This family needs you every bit as much as it needs Isabella. If you'll have us." Elena's composure finally cracked and she sobbed with relief and joy. "Sí, mi hijo. Yes, my son. We will be a family." The next few weeks brought challenges that tested every ounce of their resolve. True to her word, Martha packed her belongings and departed for Denver on the morning stage, though not before making one final, bitter attempt to convince the boys to come with her. Her efforts failed spectacularly when little Thomas clung to Isabella's skirts and declared that he didn't want to leave his new mama. The town's reaction proved more complex than Samuel had anticipated. The initial wave of gossip and condemnation was harsh, fueled by Thomas Bradley's vindictive rumors and Martha's public denunciations. Several of Samuel's regular customers made pointed comments about keeping proper company, and the church ladies formed a veritable gauntlet of disapproving glances whenever Elena or Isabella appeared in public. But Pine Creek was a frontier town, and frontier communities had their own practical wisdom about survival and second chances. James Patterson made a point of publicly congratulating Samuel on his engagement and bringing his wife to call on Elena and Isabella. Dr. Morrison, no relation, examined Isabella when she complained of morning sickness and pronounced her in excellent health, his medical opinion carrying weight in a community that valued practical considerations. Most importantly, the school teacher, Miss Abernathy, took Isabella under her wing with the fierce protectiveness of a woman who understood what it meant to be an outsider in a small town. She worked with Isabella on her English and helped her understand American social customs. "The secret," Miss Abernathy confided during one of their afternoon lessons, "is to let them see that you're no threat to their own security. Show them that you're a devoted wife and mother, that you share their values even if your background is different." The strategy proved sound. When Isabella appeared at the church social carrying a magnificent tres leches cake that had the entire congregation begging for the recipe, attitudes began to shift. When she offered to teach the other women basic Spanish phrases for trading with Mexican laborers, she found herself with eager students. And when she organized a collection of warm clothing for a family whose house had burned down, she demonstrated Christian charity that even the most conservative members could appreciate. Samuel watched these small victories with pride and growing confidence. His business actually improved as word spread about his exotic new family. Travelers stopped in hoping to catch a glimpse of the beautiful Mexican bride, and many stayed to purchase supplies. The stories they carried painted Samuel as a romantic figure rather than a scandalous one. But it was his boy's transformation that convinced Samuel beyond doubt that he had made the right choice. David, no longer burdened with trying to be the man of the house, returned to carefree pursuits. Michael's behavioral problems disappeared almost overnight once he had Isabella's patient attention and Elena's gentle guidance. And Thomas attached himself to his new family with the uncomplicated devotion of childhood, calling Elena abuela and Isabella mama without any prompting. The wedding itself, when it finally took place on a crisp December morning 6 weeks after that first snowy night, proved to be a celebration that surprised everyone with its warmth and community support. Pastor Williams, after much prayer and consultation, agreed to perform the ceremony, declaring that love sanctified by marriage could only be a blessing in God's eyes. The church was fuller than anyone had expected. James Patterson served as Samuel's best man, while Elena stood proudly beside her daughter as matron of honor. David, Michael, and Thomas served as witnesses, their faces shining with happiness. Even some of the town's initial skeptics attended, drawn by curiosity if not yet by acceptance. Isabella wore a simple white dress that Elena had spent weeks sewing, using fabric Samuel had ordered specially from Denver. The design was modest but elegant, with delicate embroidery that reflected her Mexican heritage while conforming to American sensibilities. Her dark hair was arranged in an elaborate updo crowned with a circlet of winter flowers that the boys had helped gather. As Samuel watched her walk down the aisle on Elena's arm, for who else could give this precious woman away, he felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. This beautiful, strong, wise young woman had chosen him, had chosen his children, had chosen to build a life with them despite every obstacle. Do you, Samuel Morrison, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? I do, Samuel replied, his voice steady and sure. And do you, Isabella Valdez, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? Isabella's voice rang out clear and strong, her slight accent adding music to the solemn words. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado and Almighty God, I pronounce you husband and wife. Samuel, you may kiss your bride. Their kiss was witnessed by a church full of people, but in that moment, Samuel felt as if they were the only two people in the world. When they finally broke apart, the congregation erupted in applause, not polite, restrained clapping, but genuine, enthusiastic celebration. The reception held in the church hall proved to be a revelation. Elena had spent days preparing traditional Mexican dishes alongside American favorites, creating a feast that delighted palates and opened minds. The combination of Elena's mole negro with roasted turkey, Isabella's tres leches cake alongside apple pie, and various other fusion dishes created by the combined efforts of the new family, proved that different traditions could complement rather than compete. As the evening wore on and the dancing began, Samuel found himself marveling at how completely his life had changed. 6 weeks ago, he had been a lonely widower struggling to raise 3 boys alone. Tonight, he was surrounded by family, friends, and a community learning to embrace rather than fear differences. But it was the quiet moments that meant the most. When he saw Elena teaching Dr. Morrison's wife how to fold empanadas, her face glowing with the joy of sharing her culture. When he watched Isabella dancing with little Thomas, both of them laughing as the boy tried to keep up with the steps. When David and Michael stood beside him as he cut the wedding cake, their pride in their new family evident to all. No regrets? James Patterson asked, appearing beside Samuel with 2 glasses of punch. Samuel looked around the room, at his radiant bride, at Elena holding court with a group of fascinated ladies, at his boys racing around with their friends, at the community that had come together to celebrate love over prejudice. None, he replied firmly. Not a single one. 1 year later, autumn brought changes that no one could have predicted when Samuel Morrison first rescued 2 desperate women from a burning cabin. The most obvious change was physical. Isabella's pregnancy had progressed beautifully, and she was clearly expecting their first child together within the next few weeks. But the changes went deeper. The Morrison household had become one of the most respected in Pine Creek, known for its hospitality, cultural richness, and obvious happiness. Elena had established herself as one of the town's most sought-after seamstresses, her skill with both American and Mexican designs making her indispensable to the community. Her quiet dignity and generous spirit had won over even the most stubborn skeptics. Isabella had grown into her role as Samuel's wife and the boy's stepmother with grace and confidence that amazed everyone who knew her. Her English had improved dramatically under Miss Abernathy's tutelage, though she maintained her charming accent. She had become active in the church's charitable work and was known throughout the territory for her skill in helping with difficult births, a talent that had literally saved lives and earned her respect. The boys had thrived under the stability and love of their expanded family. David was excelling in school and had announced his intention to become a teacher. Michael had discovered a talent for languages and was already fluent in Spanish, serving as an unofficial translator for the growing Mexican population. Thomas, now 7, considered himself the luckiest boy in Colorado Territory because he had 2 mamas and an abuela. Perhaps the most significant change was in Samuel himself. The quiet, careful man who had lived his life according to other people's expectations had been replaced by someone more confident, more passionate, more willing to take risks for what he believed in. His business had expanded beyond the general store to include importing Mexican goods and serving as a broker for trade between the Hispanic community and established Anglo merchants. On this particular evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought them together. Outside, the first snow of the season was beginning to fall, reminding him of that fateful night almost exactly 1 year ago when he had heard desperate cries through a storm and made the decision that changed everything. "Papa," Thomas said, pulling Samuel from his reverie, "when the baby comes, will it speak Spanish or English?" Isabella laughed, her hand resting on her rounded belly. "Both, mijo. Just like you're learning both." "And what about when we have more babies?" Michael asked. "Will they all speak both languages?" "As many languages as we can teach them," Samuel replied, reaching over to take Isabella's hand. "The more ways a person can communicate with the world, the richer their life will be." Elena smiled from her place at the table. "Your father is very wise, niños. In my country we have a saying, El que habla 2 idiomas vale por 2. One who speaks 2 languages is worth 2 people." After dinner, as the boys worked on their lessons and Elena retired to her sewing, Samuel and Isabella sat together in the parlor, her head resting on his shoulder as he read aloud from a letter they had received that morning. The letter was from Martha Collins, and its tone was markedly different from her previous correspondence. After months of chilly politeness, she had written to congratulate them on their coming child and to express her regret for her behavior during those difficult weeks. "I have had time to think," she wrote, "and I realize that my anger was not really about you, Samuel, or about Elena and Isabella. It was about my own grief, my own fear of being forgotten, of Sarah being forgotten. But I see now that love does not diminish when it is shared. It multiplies. Sarah would be happy to know that her boys are surrounded by so much love and that you have found happiness again." The letter went on to mention that Martha was planning to return to Pine Creek for the birth of their child, if she would be welcome. "What do you think?" Samuel asked, setting the letter aside. Isabella was quiet for a moment, her hand moving in slow circles over her belly. "I think," she said finally, "that family is about forgiveness as much as it is about love. She is the boy's grandmother, and this baby's grandmother too. Children need all the love they can get." Samuel kissed the top of her head, marveling once again at his wife's wisdom and generosity. "You're right, as usual. I'll write to her tomorrow and tell her she's welcome here whenever she's ready to come home." "Home," Isabella repeated softly. "Yes, that's what this is now. Home for all of us." As if summoned by their conversation, little Thomas appeared in the doorway in his nightgown, clearly having escaped from Elena's efforts to get him ready for bed. "Mama Isabella," he said, climbing onto the sofa between them. "Can I feel the baby move?" Isabella guided his small hand to where the baby was most active, and Thomas's eyes widened with wonder as he felt the strong kicks and movements. "He's going to be big and strong like Papa," Thomas declared with childhood certainty. "Or she might be clever and beautiful like Mama," Samuel countered, ruffling his youngest son's hair. "Either way," Thomas said seriously, "the baby is lucky to have all of us for family." After Elena retrieved Thomas for his bedtime routine, Samuel and Isabella remained in the quiet parlor, listening to the wind outside and the settling sounds of their peaceful home. Samuel thought about Elena's original proposition, about how shocking it had seemed at the time, and how impossible the current reality would have seemed just 1 year ago. "Do you ever wonder," he asked quietly, "what would have happened if your mother had never made that proposal to me?" Isabella considered the question seriously. "I think we would have found each other anyway," she said finally. "Maybe not as quickly, maybe not in the same way, but somehow. Some things are destined, don't you think?" Samuel thought about the series of events that had brought them together. The storm, the fire, Elena's desperate suggestion, Thomas Bradley's unwanted advances, the town's initial rejection, and ultimately their triumph over every obstacle. "I think," he said slowly, "that your mother's proposal wasn't really about what she said it was. She wasn't trying to trade you for security. She was trying to create the possibility for something real to grow between us." "What do you mean?" "She could see what I was too blind to notice, that we were meant for each other. But she also knew that I would never have pursued you under normal circumstances because of the age difference, the cultural barriers, the social expectations. So she created circumstances that forced us to really see each other." Isabella shifted to look at him directly. "You think she was matchmaking?" "I think she was being the wise woman she is. She knew that if she simply suggested I court you properly, I would have talked myself out of it. But if she shocked me into really thinking about what I wanted, what my boys needed, what kind of life I wanted to build, then maybe I would be brave enough to reach for happiness instead of just settling for duty." The more Samuel thought about it, the more certain he became. Elena's proposition had been outrageous, even offensive, but it had served its purpose. It had forced him to examine his assumptions, his desires, his beliefs about love and marriage and family. It had made him choose, actively and consciously, rather than simply drift along the path of least resistance. "Your mother," he concluded, "is either the luckiest woman alive or the shrewdest. Possibly both." Isabella laughed softly. "Definitely both. She always said that love was too important to leave to chance." As they prepared for bed that night, Samuel reflected on how profoundly his life had been transformed by one desperate woman's shocking proposal. What had seemed like the most impossible suggestion imaginable had become the foundation for the happiest year of his life. In a few weeks, their first child together would be born, adding another member to their unconventional but deeply loving family. The baby would grow up bilingual and bicultural, surrounded by siblings and grandparents, and a community that had learned to value diversity over conformity. Most importantly, the baby would grow up knowing that love could overcome any obstacle, that families could be built through choice as well as birth, and that sometimes the most shocking propositions could lead to the most beautiful outcomes. As Samuel drifted off to sleep with his pregnant wife in his arms, he whispered a prayer of gratitude for snowstorms and burning cabins and desperate mothers who loved their daughters enough to risk everything for their happiness. He was grateful for second chances and for the courage to seize them when they came. But most of all, he was grateful for Elena Valdez, who had looked at a lonely widower and a grieving daughter and seen the possibility for a love story that would last forever. The proposal that had begun with, "You want sons, right? Take my daughter to bear them," had evolved into something infinitely more precious. A family bound not by desperation or convenience, but by the strongest force in the universe. Love freely given and gratefully received. And in the end, that made all the difference. As we close this extraordinary tale of love born from the most unexpected circumstances, take a moment to reflect on the power of second chances and the courage it takes to choose love over fear. Elena's shocking proposition, "You want sons, right? Take my daughter to bear them," began as an act of desperation but transformed into something beautiful. A reminder that sometimes the most unconventional paths lead to the most profound happiness. Samuel and Isabella's journey shows us that true family isn't just about blood or convenience, but about the daily choice to love, protect, and build something meaningful together. Their story challenges us to question our own assumptions about love, acceptance, and what it truly means to be worthy of happiness. What did this story stir in your heart? Have you ever found unexpected blessings in your darkest moments, or witnessed love triumph over societal expectations? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how this tale of courage, sacrifice, and redemption resonated with you. And if stories like this one, filled with heart, hope, and the triumph of the human spirit, speak to your soul, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another journey into the extraordinary lives of ordinary people who dared to choose love.